In this video, I'm going to be going over the burst as well as the sustained DPS, the differences between those two with Tetrad, Opener, Pierce, and Critical Boost. Mathy video. Right, first up, first time using spread in a hunt and not messing around with it in the training arena, so yeah, this is going to be horrific. Right, burst and sustained. What are they? Burst DPS and sustained DPS are counterparts to your overall performance with whatever weapon it is you're utilizing. It's going to be a bit tricky trying to figure out sustained DPS with melee weapons because it depends on where you want to put the reload. For a lot of weapons like Charge Blade, you could account this to being like charging the file, or with Greatsword, trying to get your charging up to get your true charge slash. You could account that for something like your reload. And then obviously with something like Gun Lance, it's pretty easy. But then when we come to things like Longsword, Dual Blades, where do we want to put that pause to count as reload? It becomes a lot more complicated. This is something that I would be interested in doing, but yeah. Right, burst DPS. It's your RPM, or which is rounds per minute, or your potentially your hits per minute, divided by 60, multiplied by your damage. This is a really, really simple, easy equation that I don't think many people could mess up. And this is essentially your average damage per second without a reload. So if you had the opportunity to continually attack and the monster just stands there and just goes, training dummy, then this would be your average damage per second. However, this is mostly really important if you're able to kill things within like a single magazine or single rotation of your damage, which is, I mean, I've not seen Team Darkside one-shot anything yet, but until that sort of thing comes out, burst DPS isn't going to be your highest priority. It still is a priority, but it's not going to be your highest priority. We then have sustained DPS, which is going to be your average damage over the course of a hunt. This is your magazine times damage divided by reload plus mag divided by rounds per second, or if you don't know your rounds per second, it's your rounds per minute divided by 60. So this is probably going to be the slightly more important stat. However, this is just calculating in reload. It's not going to calculate you getting punched in the face, having to stop to take a potion, repositioning, running away, having to put your mantle on, etc., etc. This is why burst DPS is still very, very important, because it means that when you do have that uptime, having all of the sustain in the world means nothing if you haven't actually got any burst to go along with it, and vice versa. Sustain is going to be the more important stat. Like I said, we're not one-shotting things, we're not beating things up within one magazine. But at the same time, if you invest too heavily into the sustain side, you're going to be taking your 5, 6, 7 minute hunts into 20, 30 minute hunt. To put it simply, when I actually get into the test, this was just explaining the premise of what it is I'm doing, but when I actually get into the test, the stronger options are going to be the one that have a very consistent increase in both burst and sustain. If one is weighted more towards burst, it is, I don't want to say bad, but it's not as optimal. And if one has again a higher increase in sustain, again, it's not bad, it's just not going to be optimal. There potentially is going to be scenarios of where one will be beneficial over the other. Going for a higher burst on something like a spread heavy bowgun would probably be more beneficial than going for higher sustain on something like a spread heavy bowgun. And the simple reasoning for this is we have a very short window of where we actually want to get all of our damage out. And if we can get all of our damage out, that means we can stagger or KO or even kill the monster. Right, onto the test. All I did was, again, damage track each shot, 146, let it register, type it into a spreadsheet, fire again, 141, rinse and repeat. I did this for a total of 4 magazines. I used the Rompompolo heavy bowgun for one simple reason. It doesn't have like any form of damage talent on it, and it gives Pierce 2 with a 6-round mag. And this is important because in order to effectively test Tetrad, we need a 6-round mag minimum. I could have gone with element, but I kind of felt like with the way in which element is working at the moment, it's bugged. Element values are bad. I don't know. I keep getting about 1,000,001 different answers. I thought just going for Pierce would be more consistent. I did try it on normal. However, the hit zone values on normal seem to be, well, they're hurting my brain. So I went straight back to utilizing Old Faithful, Pierce Heavy Bowgun, Rompompolo. It just has the guard up. It's got a level 3 decoration. And all I did was test 4 times at 100% affinity, 60% affinity, 0% affinity, and then 85% affinity. I tested the heavy bowgun with nothing in the weapon, then with bandolier, then with opener, then with pierce duel 3, then with critical boost 3, and I tracked each one individually. These are the results at 100% affinity. Nothing, Tetrad, opening shot, pierce, and then critical boost. The green highlights are where Tetrad or opening shot are taking effect. And the very, very bottom 2 numbers, the first one is the total damage done throughout the entire test. And then the very bottom number is the average damage of the average shot, which then makes its way across to a spreadsheet formula that I have set up that calculates total magazine damage, burst DPS, as well as sustained DPS, taking into account that average damage, which looks something like this. So hopefully you can see you got nothing, Tetrad, opening shot, pierce, and then critical boost. Got the damage that they've been doing under base, the RPM, the mag size, the reload, taking opening shot into account. They don't really have an optimal range. It's from another game, but the equations are still the same. The total magazine damage, as well as the burst and sustained DPS. We're using the nothing as the benchmark, so they're all being compared to nothing. So over nothing, Tetrad at 100% affinity is doing about 1.48% more in both burst and sustain. Opening shot is doing 1.16% more in burst, but 10.61% more in sustained. Pierce is doing 5.06% more in both burst and sustain, and critical boost is doing 7.59% more in both burst and sustain. Again, though, do remember this is just critical boost level 3. I'm literally just swapping that level 3 deco for all of them. Now, what this means at face value, at 100% affinity, critical boost is the most powerful, then pierce, then opening shot, then Tetrad at 100% affinity. And I don't mean this is like 100% affinity on weak points. I mean this at 100% affinity at all times. Even if you're not hitting a weak point, you still have 100% affinity. Essentially, 100% affinity without Wex. Like, that is what is required, because the moment you start to lose that, which is what the next test is, things become a little bit skew whiff. So this is at 60%. Hopefully you can see some of the damage numbers are a little bit all over the place now, and it's simply just because we're not critting all of the time. However, what I do hope you noticed from this is that Tetrad, mostly just because of those 2 shots, is actually creeping up there, and this is simply just because of the way in which Tetrad works. I am pretty sure it's bugged. Now, the description for it says that the attack bonus, which I believe is 5%, applies to both the 4th and 6th, while the affinity bonus, which I believe is 12% at level 3, only applies to the 4th. However, with the testings that I have done, both the attack and both the affinity are applying to both the 4th and 6th. I will need someone who is a lot more knowledgeable about this game to actually look into that. However, just from the basic math, as well as the showings and testings that I have done, unless I'm getting amazingly lucky with the crits on the 6th shot, the affinity is applying to both, which is, yeah, oh wow, another bug skill potentially. So how does this look in terms of DPS? Well, things actually do get a bit interesting here, and at 60% affinity, you should take into consideration that a lot of this is just going to be RNG on crit. Now, The two with the most potential here is actually Critical Boost, because I'm only using level 3. This can go up to level 5, as well as Tetrad, surprisingly. And that is simply just because for potentially 2 shots, but definitely 1 shot, I am not at 60% affinity. I'm at 72. Why is that 72 a big deal? Well, just take into account just the affinity, that's going from 60 to 72 is an 8.57% increase in your effective raw. Granted, it is for, as far as we know, just 1 shot, but I'm starting to believe with all the testing I've done, it is applying to 2, which again is a bug, and if it is a bug, I do hope it gets fixed. But that is an 8.57% increase in EFR for that 1 shot. That is actually pretty damn big, and that's just accounting for the affinity. We're also getting, I believe, 5% raw on top of it, or is it 5% damage? I can't quite remember. But yeah, that 1 shot is actually pretty big. And then we get just the raw again, which is still pretty impressive for another shot, which will be the 6th bullet. So Tetrad is getting 4.35 across the board. Opening shot is getting 0.4 on both increase in magazine as well as DPS, which is abysmal. But we are getting 9.78 in terms of sustain, which is pretty good. But at that conversion rate, it's completely not worth it, annoyingly. Pierce is getting 4.66 across the board. And then Critical Boost is getting 4.55 across the board. Now, here's the thing. I didn't actually check, which I should have done, how many crits I'm actually getting with each of these. I like to try and figure out some sort of ratio, which means that potentially under this scenario, this is just weakness exploit and maximum might taken into account. Under this scenario, potentially the most powerful one on this list now is Tetrad. If we put it to Critical Boost 5, Critical Boost would be the most powerful. Then Pierce. Then, honestly, nothing. And then Opening Shot, which potentially seems weird to say, but for a 0.4% increase in your magazine damage and then in your burst damage, I mean, if we were talking hundreds of thousands here, like 154.4k, then yeah, take that 0.4% increase. But we're not. We're talking hundreds. 154.4. That 0.4 increase is worth not a lot. Not anything at all. Sure, that 9.78% increase in sustained DPS is going to be worth something, but the only times you're ever really going to notice that increase or feel that increase is going to be when the monster is staggered or KO'd, something. If you're having to run around and roll and do other things, you're not going to feel it. You're not going to notice it. That near 10% increase in sustained DPS is going to count for nothing, I'm afraid to say. That being said, there are areas where Opening Shot is going to be absolutely crucial, and that is mostly going to be seen in ammo types that mean you can't reload on the move. So a reload animation that forces you to stand still. That's where Opening Shot is really going to come in clutch on this scenario. That being said, that's literally just slicing ammo, because of where we're now comparing affinity. I'm pretty sure that stickies still can't crit, nor can clusters. And I just realised how much this video is dragging on for, so I do apologise for that. We're just going to speed run the remainder of this. So we're not going to talk about that weird noise I just made. It was a complete accident. 0% affinity. These are the damage numbers. You might notice that nothing and Critical Boost are the exact same, because without affinity, Critical Boost doesn't work. So, Tetrad getting 4.3% more. Opening Shot getting 1.2% more on mag and burst, but 10.65% more on sustain. Pierce is getting 5.6% more across the board. And obviously, like I said, Critical Boost gets nothing. Congratulations, Critical Boost. You're worthless in this scenario. Up next, I utilised burst Agitator, and the Corrupted Mantle to get myself to 85% affinity, which I feel is like a good area to be. And then tested them all again. Tetrad, Opening Shot, Pierce, Critical Boost. And this is where I found the most interesting results. Quite simply, if you don't give Tetrad enough room to work, it starts to taper off. We're getting a 1.66% increase in everything. Simple reason being, the closer that nothing has to work up to, the less you're actually getting out of Tetrad. Whereas Opening Shot basically gets nothing in terms of burst and sustain, because it is now just completely dependent when it comes to burst and magazine as to whether or not the opening shot itself crits. And if it doesn't crit, you might as well have nothing until the reload. Pierce is doing wondrous things, coming in at 4.86% across the board, and then again Critical Boost coming in at 7.42% across the board. You might notice that the damage numbers for this one are slightly higher, and that's simply just because Burst, level 1, Corrupted Mantle, as well as Agitator. So we are getting higher raw on this one, where the other tests didn't utilize that. And before someone asks for my magical 100% affinity build without utilizing weakness exploit, I am afraid to say in order to do it I had to install a mod, which has since been uninstalled because I don't like that sort of shit in my game. But in order to test at 100% affinity, I had to do it. I'm sorry. So which is better, Critical Boost, Pierce, Tetrad, or Opening Shot? Well, Opening Shot basically gives you nothing other than reload unless you actually get a crit on that first shot. Tetrad is theoretically more powerful, but it is relying on you being between 40 and I'd say about 70% affinity, because in order to get the room to work, you need Tetrad to actually be able to apply that affinity in the first place. Pierce is just a stable increase throughout, no matter what, whether you crit or not. Critical Boost is the most powerful, but it is obviously reliant on how much affinity you actually have. If you've got like below 50%, you're going to struggle. If you've got over 50%, then theoretically it will be the highest. I don't wish to tell you how you should run, what you should run. However, I do plan on doing another test. I need an Archean heavy bowgun with the 3 level 2 decorations so I can then start testing combinations. When I have that, I will get back to you with another video. But again, I need a certain roll on it with basically no affinity and then capacity so that I can test Tetrad at, again, 100%, 0%, etc., etc. So that bit's kicking my butt. However, in the meantime, have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.